Denay, embarked on the Chinchipe, descended to its junction with the Marañon, reached the mouth at Napo on the 31st of July, just in time to observe an immersion of the first satellite of Jupiter, which allowed this Humboldt of the 18th century to accurately determine the latitude and longitude of the spot, visited the villages on both banks, and on the 6th of September arrived in front of the fort of Para. This immense journey had important results. Not only was the course of the Amazon made out in scientific fashion, but it seemed almost certain that it communicated with the Orinoco. 55 years later, Humboldt and Bonpland completed the valuable work of La Contamine and drew up the map of the Marañon as far as Napo. Since this period, the Amazon itself and all its principal tributaries have been frequently visited. In 1827, Lister Maw, in 1834 and 1835, Smythe, in 1844, the French lieutenant in command of the Boulonnais, the Brazilian Valdez, in 1840, the French Paul Marcoy, from 1848 to 1860, the whimsical painter Biard, in 1859, Professor Agassiz, in 1865 and 1866, in 1867, the Brazilian engineer Franz Keller Linsanger, and lastly, in 1879, Dr. Crevaux, have explored the course of the river, ascended many of its tributaries, and ascertained the navigability of its principal affluents. But what has won the greatest honor for the Brazilian government is that on the 31st of July, 1857, after numerous frontier disputes between France and Brazil about the Guiana boundary, the course of the Amazon was declared to be free and open to all flags, and to make practice harmonize with theory, Brazil entered into negotiations with the neighboring powers for the exploration of every river road in the basin of the Amazon. Today, lines of well-found steamboats, which correspond direct with Liverpool, are plying on the river from its mouth up to Manaos; others ascend to Iquitos; others by way of the Tapajos, the Madeira, the Rio Negro, or the Purus, make their way into the center of Peru and Bolivia. One can easily imagine the progress which commerce will one day make in this immense and wealthy area, which is without a rival in the world. But to this medal of the future there is a reverse. No progress can be accomplished without detriment to the indigenous races. In face, on the upper Amazon, many Indian tribes have already disappeared, among others the Curicicurus and the Soromeos. On the Putumayo, if a few Yuris are still met with, the Yahas have abandoned the district to take refuge among some of the distant tributaries, and the Mayus have quitted its banks to wander in their diminished numbers among the forests of Yapura. The Tunantins is almost depopulated, and there are only a few families of wandering Indians at the mouth of the Urura. The Tefe is almost deserted, and near the sources of the Yapur there remained but the fragments of the great nation of the Yumawa. The Coari is forsaken. There are but few Muras Indians on the banks of the Purus. Of the ancient Manaos one can count but a wandering party or two. On the banks of the Rio Negro there are only a few half-breeds, Portuguese and natives, where a few years ago 24 different nations had their homes. Such is the law of progress. The Indians will disappear. Before the Anglo-Saxon race, Australians and Tasmanians have vanished. Before the conquerors of the Far West, the North American Indians have been wiped out. One day, perhaps, the Arabs will be annihilated by the colonization of the French. But we must return to 1852. The means of communication, so numerous now, did not then exist, and the journey of Joam Garral would require not less than 4 months, owing to the conditions under which it was made. Hence this observation of Benito, while the two friends were watching the river as it gently flowed at their feet: "Manoel, my friend, if there is very little interval between our arrival at Belem and the moment of our separation, the time will appear to you to be very short." "Yes, Benito," said Manoel, "and very long as well, for Minha cannot be my wife until the end of the voyage." Chapter 5